Welcome back to the Old West Tales, where every story whispers secrets of love, heartbreak, and redemption. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. Drop your location in the comments. I'm curious which part of the world my viewers are from. Sit back and let me take you on a journey that might just melt your heart tonight. The morning sun stretched across the Texas prairie as rancher Jacob Carter repaired a broken fence near the edge of his property. His horse suddenly became restless, refusing to move another step. Curious, Jacob noticed an old leather saddlebag tangled beneath a fallen cottonwood tree. Inside was a weathered revolver, a silver pocket watch engraved with the initials HW, and a sealed envelope covered in dust. The wax seal had never been broken. Across the front were the words, "For my daughter, Abigail Whitmore, only if I do not return." Jacob recognized the name immediately. Abigail Whitmore was the daughter of Henry Whitmore, the wealthiest cattle baron in 3 counties, a man who had supposedly died nearly a year earlier after a tragic stagecoach accident. Thinking the letter belonged to her, Jacob rode into the town of Red Creek. Abigail had never trusted ranchers. Her father had spent years battling them over grazing rights, and she believed they cared more about land than people. When Jacob arrived at the Whitmore mansion, the guards almost threw him off the property. Abigail reluctantly agreed to meet him only after seeing the seal on the envelope. She snatched the letter from his hands, convinced it was some cruel trick, but when she opened it, her face turned pale. It was unmistakably her father's handwriting. The letter contained only a few sentences. "Abigail, if you are reading this, they have convinced the world I am dead. Do not trust anyone handling my estate. Follow the Black Hawk carved into stone. It will lead you to the truth. I love you, Father." Abigail stared silently at the date beneath the signature. The letter had been written 3 weeks after Henry Whitmore's funeral. She refused to believe it at first. Her father's lawyer had identified the burned body himself. Hundreds of townspeople had attended the funeral, yet the handwriting, signature, and personal details were impossible to fake. Jacob suggested someone had staged the death, but Abigail angrily accused him of planning the letter to steal part of the Whitmore fortune. Before she could throw him out, the family attorney, Charles Pembroke, entered the room. The moment he saw the letter, the calm smile vanished from his face. He demanded to see it immediately. Abigail noticed something strange. Pembroke didn't seem shocked that her father might be alive. Instead, he looked frightened. He insisted the letter was a forgery and ordered Jacob off the property. As Jacob left, he noticed Pembroke quietly burning another stack of old documents in the mansion's fireplace. Something about the lawyer's nervous behavior convinced him the mystery was far bigger than a simple fake letter. That night, someone broke into Jacob's ranch house. The intruder searched every drawer before discovering the empty saddlebag. Jacob surprised the man, but the masked stranger escaped into the darkness after firing 2 shots that barely missed him. The only thing left behind was a silver cufflink engraved with the same HW initials from the pocket watch. The next morning, Abigail secretly rode to Jacob's ranch. She apologized for doubting him after realizing someone had also searched her father's private study during the night. Nothing valuable had been stolen except an old frontier map that Henry Whitmore had treasured for years. Remembering the words in the letter, they searched the map from memory until Abigail recalled a landmark called Black Hawk Bluff, a rocky cliff nearly 50 miles west near abandoned mining trails. They rode together across the frontier, following scattered clues left by Henry Whitmore years before. At Black Hawk Bluff, they discovered the carving of a hawk exactly as described in the letter. Hidden beneath loose stones was a small iron box containing another letter, a railroad timetable, and a photograph that left Abigail speechless. The picture showed her father standing beside Charles Pembroke, taken 2 months after Henry Whitmore had supposedly died. Before they could examine it further, rifle shots echoed across the canyon. Hidden gunmen opened fire from the cliffs, forcing Jacob and Abigail to dive behind the rocks as bullets shattered the stone around them. Jacob returned fire with his Winchester, forcing the gunmen to keep their heads down while Abigail crawled toward the iron box. She managed to grab the photograph and letters just before another bullet shattered the rock where they had been lying. Realizing they were badly outnumbered, Jacob spotted a narrow trail leading down the canyon wall. He pulled Abigail onto his horse and together they charged through the gunfire. The horse slipped on loose gravel but regained its footing, carrying him into a maze of dry creek beds where the attackers finally lost their trail. They didn't stop until nightfall. Hidden beside a small campfire, Abigail unfolded the second letter. Her father's handwriting was unmistakable. This message revealed that Henry Whitmore had uncovered conspiracy involving trusted business partners who intended to seize his cattle empire by declaring him dead. He had staged secret meetings to gather evidence, but before he could expose them, he realized someone close to him had betrayed him. The letter ended with another clue. The truth rests beneath the Liberty Bell at Fort Mason. Trust only the man who carries the silver watch. Jacob looked down at the engraved pocket watch he had found inside the saddlebag. For the first time, Abigail believed her father had expected Jacob, not her, to uncover the truth. She wondered how Henry could have known the rancher, but Jacob admitted he had once helped an injured stranger years earlier near the river. The man never gave his name, but insisted that one day Jacob's honesty would save an innocent family. Neither of them had realized that stranger had been Henry Whitmore. Their journey to the abandoned military outpost known as Fort Mason took 2 exhausting days. The old fort had long been deserted, with weathered buildings collapsing beneath years of wind and dust. Near the center of the courtyard stood an old bronze Liberty Bell mounted on a stone platform. Beneath it, hidden inside a loose foundation stone, they discovered a leather journal wrapped carefully in oilcloth to protect it from moisture. The journal contained detailed records of secret payments made by Charles Pembroke and several powerful businessmen. Every payment had gone to hired gunmen, corrupt officials, and even the doctor who had signed Henry Whitmore's death certificate. There were also receipts showing that millions of dollars worth of cattle, land deeds, and railroad shares had quietly changed ownership only days after the funeral. Abigail finally understood the motive. Her father's death had never been about revenge. It had been about stealing one of the largest fortunes in Texas. Before they could leave, hoofbeats thundered across the empty fort. Dozens of armed riders surrounded the buildings from every direction. Charles Pembroke calmly rode to the front gate, dressed in black and smiling as though the chase had finally ended. He admitted that Henry Whitmore had discovered the embezzlement scheme, forcing conspirators to fake his death before he could expose them. They had planned to keep Henry imprisoned until every piece of his fortune had been transferred legally into their hands. Abigail demanded to know where her father was. Pembroke simply replied that Henry had remained useful for far longer than expected, but had recently escaped captivity. Unfortunately, he claimed, the old man would never survive alone in the wilderness. Jacob didn't believe a word of it. He noticed fresh mud on a horse's hooves despite weeks of dry weather across the region. That could only mean Pembroke and his men had recently visited a place with flowing water, something rare in that part of Texas. As Pembroke ordered his gunmen to seize the journal, Jacob threw the leather book into the crumbling bell tower above them. While the outlaws scrambled toward the tower, Jacob and Abigail sprinted to the abandoned barracks. They escaped through a collapsed stable and stole 2 fresh horses before racing toward the only nearby water source marked on Henry's old railroad timetable, a forgotten trading post built beside Cold Spring Creek. When they arrived after sunset, the trading post appeared abandoned, but faint lantern light flickered beneath the floorboards of the old general store. Jacob quietly lifted a loose trapdoor and heard muffled voices below. Peering into the hidden cellar, they froze. Sitting in a wooden chair with chains around his wrists, but very much alive, was Henry Whitmore himself. Before they could call out to him, the cold click of revolver hammers echoed behind them. They slowly turned to find Pembroke's men already waiting, smiling as the trap finally snapped shut. Jacob reacted before the outlaws could fire. He shoved Abigail to the ground as the first shots exploded through the trading post. Splinter would fill the air while Jacob rolled behind an overturned wagon and returned fire. The gunfight echoed across the empty valley. During the chaos, Henry Whitmore managed to work on his hands free from the chains. He grabbed a loose lantern and hurled it against the cellar wall. Flames spread across old barrels and crates, filling the underground room with thick smoke. The fire created the distraction Jacob needed. He charged into the cellar, knocked one outlaw unconscious with but his rifle, and shot the lock off Henry's chains. Abigail rushed to embrace her father for the first time in nearly a year, but Henry urged them to keep moving. Pembroke and his remaining gunmen fled outside as the burning building threatened to collapse. They mounted their horses and raced toward the railroad bridge, believing they could still escape with the forged deeds and stolen inheritance papers. Jacob, Abigail, and Henry pursued them across the open prairie. The chase ended at the wooden bridge spanning a deep canyon. Pembroke held the satchel containing every forged document and laughed, claiming that without those papers no jury would ever believe Henry had been kidnapped. He pointed his revolver at Abigail, intending to silence the last rightful heir forever. Before he could pull the trigger, Henry stepped in front of his daughter. Pembroke hesitated for just a second, long enough for Jacob to fire. The bullet struck Pembroke's gun, sending it spinning into the canyon. The remaining outlaws opened fire, but the town sheriff and a posse suddenly appeared from the opposite side of the bridge. Earlier that morning, Jacob had secretly sent a trusted ranch hand to Red Creek with pages torn from Henry's journal as proof of conspiracy. Faced with overwhelming numbers, most of the gunmen surrendered. Pembroke tried one last desperate escape, galloping across the weakened bridge. The old timbers gave way beneath his horse. He leaped for safety but failed to grab the edge, disappearing into the rocky gorge below along with a satchel of forged documents. The authentic journal and Henry's surviving records, however, were already safely in the sheriff's possession in the weeks that followed. Henry Whitmore publicly revealed how Pembroke and his partners had staged a stagecoach accident, bribed a doctor, substituted another burned body, and kept him in prison while they quietly transferred his land, cattle, and railroad investments into their own names. The surviving conspirators were arrested. The stolen property was returned to the courts, and Henry's fortune was restored to its rightful owner. The people of Red Creek were stunned to learn that the man they had buried had been alive all along. Henry never forgot who had risked everything to uncover the truth. He offered Jacob a generous reward, but the rancher refused to accept payment for doing what was right. Smiling, Henry said there was one reward Jacob could not refuse. He gave Jacob his blessing to court Abigail, admitting that no amount of wealth could buy the kind of courage and loyalty Jacob had shown. At first, Abigail laughed at the idea, remembering how she had once accused Jacob of being nothing more than a greedy rancher. But as they spent more time rebuilding the ranches and helping Henry recover, the distrust between them slowly disappeared. Respect turned into friendship, and friendship blossomed into love. Several months later, beneath the same cottonwood tree where the mysterious saddlebag had first been found, Jacob asked Abigail to marry him. With tears in her eyes, she said yes, on their wedding day. Henry handed Jacob the silver pocket watch that had started the entire mystery. Inside its cover was a message Jacob had never noticed before. The greatest inheritance is not land or gold, but the people willing to fight for the truth. Jacob closed the watch, looked at Abigail waiting beside him, and realized that the dead man's letter had led him not only to the greatest mystery of his life, but also to the woman he would love forever. I love all of you, my wonderful audience of Wild West Tales. Tell me how this story made you feel. Leave a comment below. Type 1 if you love this story. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more epic tales from the wild.